Hello, this is Meontech speaking, and for the past 3 to 4 years I've been developing a game with a friend of mine, and we're hoping that it's eventually going to be a two-dimensional top-down isometric shooter with hacks and slash elements as well as stealth elements too, because I'm very much of a fan of Metro 2033 in terms of a stealth, optional stealth survival shooter slash not really open world. But yeah, besides the point, before I get into the nitty-gritty of the actual code, I'll go ahead and actually run this so that you can see what I've developed thus far. And yes, I'm using a Mega Man sprite, get over it. I haven't actually developed on any of the sprites yet for the actual project. I'm not going to be using the Mega Man sprite forever, so consider this highly whip. What I have done, however, is, as you can probably see in the bottom left there is a yellow diamond which represents the target that I will be able to lock onto, because I'm using a system that is similar to the Zelda Ocarina of Time's Z targeting system mechanic, except in a two-dimensional perspective. And once you've locked onto a target, there's also other yellow diamonds which represent tertiary damage, or at least targets that will be able to be subject to tertiary damage. I'm currently using linear for tertiary damage, that is any enemies behind the target is in a line will be able to be subject to damage. I also have radial, so for example, if I'm locked onto the center object instance there and have the tertiary damage as splash damage, then I can pretty much eliminate the entirety of this cluster here if I set the radius to 150 to 200. I've also got some fairly simple movement as well as fairly simple projectiles. I also have various different input methods. There is 0 for no input, 1 for standard keyboard and mouse, 2 for keyboard only, and 3 for gamepad, which is what I was using before. We'll go to 1 so I can actually show you how I've been implementing the keyboard and mouse. Now, obviously, it's not going to be optimal for keyboard and mouse because I've been developing it primarily for gamepad, but I'm going to try my best to support keyboard and mouse, and as well as create an input variant on keyboard and mouse minus the mouse, so that players can play it on a laptop, which would be otherwise hell to play with a trackpad. As for the actual locking on, it doesn't actually lock onto the enemies. What it does is the player instance locks onto the target hotspot. Now, the target hotspot is a completely different object to any enemy that uses it, and essentially it checks for whether you have a target hotspot in play and then allows you to lock onto it. Now, the enemy spawns the target hotspot after checking whether it is in your field of view with this bit of code here, whether it's actually in your field of view, and then create well, not create, but set the variable to 1 that is in pizza slice. Then it checks whether it's pizza slice is 1, and if there is no target object, then it will create a target object and set the ID of that target object to the target object variable, and then we'll reference that variable from then on, as well as for being able to destroy it. Now, for the target hotspot, there's just some variables here. This here is what allows it to have tertiary damage, and I'm going to eventually set that to a global variable and make it so that it is shared between multiple players, so that you can actually have multiple players lock onto the same target and then influence different damages onto that target. But yeah, there's nothing else really that I have to show here, so I'll leave it at this. Pew 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 pew. You can actually wipe out a lot of enemies this way.